So we're very pleased to have David Leventhal give our next presentation, who's also going to lead, for those who signed up for it in advance, the live dance program this afternoon. So David Leventhal is a dancer, teaching artist, and program director for the Mark Morris Dance Group for the Parkinson's disease program, which reaches over 400 communities in 30 countries, offering classes and training teachers worldwide. And it's recognized for advancing dance as a therapeutic tool for people with Parkinson's. He co-produced 5 volumes at-home instructional videos for Parkinson's patients and co-developed Moving Through Glass, a Google Glass-based prototype to assist with balance and gait. He has earned many honors, including the 2016 World Parkinson Congress Award for Distinguished Contribution and many others that I'm not listing for time here. David Leventhal has contributed chapters about his work to 4 books, including a recent contribution to Renee Fleming's Music and Mind. And he teaches a dance-based elective at Columbia University's narrative medicine curriculum. He also serves on the boards of the Davis Phinney Foundation and Dance and Creative Wellness Foundation. He's a former Mark Morris Dance Group member, 1997 to 2011, and received a Bessie Award for his performance career and graduated with honors from Brown University. So a man of many talents, and we're very happy to have him present today on Dance for Parkinson's. So thank you.
First of all, thank you to previous speakers for 2 exceptionally informative presentations. Nice to be able to change pace, and also thank you to our for our movement break, which kind of set things up. So it's wonderful to be back. I grew up in Massachusetts, so I spent the first 18 years of my life here in the Boston area. Started dancing here in the Boston area, so it's really nice to be able to come back here and share the joys and benefits of dance with the community here. When I talk about dance and Parkinson's, and I mention those 2 words together, a lot of people have the same reaction as Parkinson's and skin biopsies. Like, what do those 2 have to do with each other? And maybe even people think that dance and Parkinson's are at opposite ends of the spectrum. I think in general, as a society, we don't necessarily think about dance that much in our lives, or if we do, think about it as something that we cannot do, will not do not want to do, but I'm happy to go see it. Let me go see the professionals dance. That's where dance really enters our lives. One of the things I'm here to remind us of is that dance is part of our human legacy, it's part of our human lineage. We've been dancing for tens of thousands of years. These are some cave drawings from Borneo 20,000 years ago. And it's pretty clear that these folks they're dancing. Not just that they're dancing, but they're dancing in a group. They're dancing together in synchrony. They're pretty much all doing the same move. Maybe this one is doing his own improvisation over here, but everybody else is doing pretty much movement together. We can't necessarily hear the music that they were hearing, but we can guess that maybe they were also synchronizing physically and to the music that they're hearing. Here we see some other representations of dance in early art, that emphasis on the group, but also starting in ancient Greek painting, dance as narrative, dance as storytelling. So we have to ask, why has dance sort of remained part of our human story? Why do we still dance? And there are a lot of social scientists and anthropologists who are trying to answer this question. In the work we're doing, one of those responses may be that dance has health benefits. Dance may help us maintain physical health. I would argue probably there's also social benefits, that dance brings us together. It is a bonding activity that as a species has enabled us to form the kinds of social connections that sustain us, that give us sort of social nourishment, and that we've needed those bonds to be able to evolve and develop as a species to do big things, like the kind of research projects that you heard earlier. Those are lots of people synchronizing their work together. Well, that's very, very similar to what happens in dance intervention. And we see even today, modern times, traditional indigenous societies using dance as a form of social communication, but also as a form of healing, as a form of traditional medicine, right? So all of these ideas were sort of first and foremost in the mind of Ole Westheimer, who's pictured here, dancing with one of our participants. Ole in year 2000, was charged with running a support group for people living with Parkinson's in Brooklyn, New York. Her husband was a neurologist at another Parkinson's Foundation Center for Excellence in Brooklyn at Downstate Medical Center. And Ole started this support group, and she realized in working with this group that people spent a lot of time kind of enveloped by their Parkinson's, immersed in their Parkinson's, spending a lot of time thinking about and talking about the condition itself. And she had a vision for realizing how important that was, but realizing that there's a lot more to life than talking about Parkinson's. And in fact, there might be some benefit to bringing people together to do something other than a Parkinson's focused activity. And Ole had a dance background. So she started thinking about the history of dance and some of the neuroscience behind what dancers do, the way dancers train their bodies to do very specific patterns and very specific modalities. She started thinking about maybe there's something here. So she approached us in 2001 at the Mark Morris Dance Group and pitched this idea of a specialized dance class for people with Parkinson's. Now, the interesting thing in the history of this program is that when we started, Ole did not want us as the teachers to know very much about Parkinson's, because she didn't want the class to replicate a clinical environment, and she didn't want it to replicate the environment of the support group where it was very much about Parkinson's. She believed that if we could get people to step into a studio and think of themselves as dancers and to focus on movement as dancers, that in itself would be transformative, and that in itself would be therapeutic. And her hunch 23 years ago has turned out to be right, both anecdotally, but also in more than 50 peer-reviewed studies on the impact of dance and Parkinson's, which are pretty conclusive in terms of dance actually providing some very significant benefits for people with Parkinson's. So I got involved because at the time I was dancing professionally with Mark Morris's company. I first saw them when I was living here in Boston. I fell in love with the work. And when I moved to New York, I auditioned for the company and started working with them. And so I was asked to start teaching, and I came into this environment really not knowing a lot about Parkinson's at all. But what we did know about were the elements of dance training, so how dancers train their bodies and their brains to do very advanced, highly complex motor skills, okay? So we also knew how to practice those skills. So what dancers have to do, just as musicians have to do, is practice, 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 right? What's the best way to get to Carnegie Hall? And it is in fact true, our brain is stubborn in learning new things. We have to keep at it. Just like any new motor activity, you have to keep practicing those patterns over time. It's not something you can do once, just like Renee Fleming cannot learn a whole opera in 2 hours. She has to practice that part over a period of weeks and months so that when she gets on stage, it's second nature. She can focus on the emotion. She can focus on the acting. She doesn't have to think about all of the small muscular contractions that happen in her voice. That becomes automatic. Same with dancers. And the third element that was valuable for us as dancers was the performative element. Dance in many cultures is a social form, but in other cultures, it's a performance form. We get on stage and perform for other people, and we need to make sure that what we're doing with our bodies can be legible to the audience. We're telling stories, just like on that Greek vase, telling stories with our bodies. So this concept has now spread, as David introduced, to over 400 communities around the world. And I think what bonds these communities is the sense that dance is universal. It's a universal language that is spoken all over the world. There are dancers all over the world who are interested in committing to service, committing to helping members of their community live better, move better, and think about their bodies in a different way. And that Parkinson's, unfortunately, is universal. So a lot of the work that I do is bringing together the dance community and the Parkinson's community and the medical community to create these collaborations where activities of
well-being, like a dance class, can thrive. So I mentioned this earlier, this idea of thinking like a dancer. What does this mean to think like a dancer? A lot of people say, well, if dancers are, they're not known for thinking. They just get on stage and they move around. And most of them, a lot of them never go to college. And what do you mean think like a dancer? So, well, let's think about this. And I think a lot of these things also apply to athletes. Athletes train their brains as much as their bodies. Because when it comes down to the heat of battle, that Olympic event, or that US Open final, it really is a mind game. It's the mind controlling the body to do very complicated things. So there are 4 elements here that I think are critically important, particularly for people living with Parkinson's. One is imagery, leveraging imagery in the service of movement. Sometimes it's hard to access movement in your body. It's hard to do things that you used to be able to do. But the imagination has an incredible power. It can bypass some of those mechanical challenges that you have and give us an aesthetic goal. You know this from your boxing classes, you know it from your NIA classes, you know it just getting around the house. A particular image or a particular idea can often resonate more than the mechanical idea of a particular movement. So we use imagery and imagination in everything we do. We try to establish what I would call aesthetic goals more than physical goals. So for example, screwing in a light bulb, right? We all know what that is. I don't have to think about it. But if I said, put your hand out and turn it 90 degrees, I have to cognitively figure out what that means. But screwing in a light bulb, no problem. We know what that is. So a lot of it is relying on kind of everyday movement images that we do and then applying them abstractly. So we might do a dance that is that twisting movement, and I can use that image to reinforce the movement. And you see people who otherwise have challenges with the mechanics of movement suddenly come alive and be able to do things because we're latching into their imagination. Number 2, dancers are motor planning experts, okay? We are either making up choreography or given choreography that we then have to execute. Now, it doesn't happen right away. We actually have to think about it. We have to practice it. But we always have a plan. Even when we're improvising, we have a plan, right? We're thinking about what direction I want to go in or what speed I want to go in. And so we're using our big brain to plan our movements. And that's really important because in Parkinson's, that automatic planning that we've relied on for our whole lives is no longer as reliable. So we really have to come back to a very conscious planning, and that is exactly what dancers and choreographers do. Number 3, and this is the big one, it's the topic of Renee Fleming's book, music. Music as a guide. Our previous speaker just kept mentioning, oh, this would be so much better with music. And yes, it would be. Everything is better with music. Music has a way of integrating different parts of the brain to work together and communicate in ways that they don't normally communicate. So again, just as we are wired to dance, it's been part of our lineage, we are wired to respond to music. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm tone deaf, or I don't really listen. But if you put music on, a majority of us would probably be tapping along to that music. We'd find some way to entrain to that music if we liked it, okay? So music can be an incredible guiding coach, and everything we do in a dance environment is supported by the music. And number 4, I mentioned this a little earlier, but this idea of how do we project our movements to the world? This is all about moving big. This is about moving with intention. And this is really about being a performer. So you don't have to perform on a stage, but in daily life, we want our movements to register. We want to be able to carry on conversations. We want our facial expression to read. And sometimes when we're dealing with masked expression or a smaller amplitude, we forget the value of having a powerful expression, of having this sort of theatricality of movement. So I'm going to see if this will play.
The motivation
Oops.
for starting a dance class for people with Parkinson's came from the desire to help people remember who they are is still the most important component of their existence, not Parkinson's.
At first didn't want to do it because I thought I'd be associated with a lot of people on the stage of Parkinson's that I didn't want to be at, and that would be discouraging to me. But I finally went, and I've never regretted the decision that I made.
Medicines can't always do as much as we want. So I've been recommending people for years and years to take dance for PD.
I see transformation happen in front of my eyes. So people often come into the class with a lot of rigidity, and suddenly in that space, they come alive.
My hands are so stiff I can't straighten my hand out. You know, just start moving gently and all of that stiffness goes away.
There is something magical that takes place in there. I'm not sitting there thinking about my body. I'm just trying to move.
I hear from my patients when they come back how much it seems to support and sustain them emotionally.
I look to the rest of the group for inspiration. We are there for moral, spiritual, emotional support.
When I came in, I really didn't even have a chance to be skeptical because the group immediately embraces you.
It's a time when you connect and you don't have to be embarrassed because everybody else has a problem too.
Gives people the courage to leave their apartments and go somewhere else and have a different kind of experience than they do when they're alone, which ends up being a lot of the time.
When someone shakes hands with someone who can hardly hold their hand up, they're honoring the humanness of the individual. The feeling I get from being in this group is a feeling that it's going to be hard to replace with any other activity. So I hope it lasts as long as I do.
No matter what stage you are or what your previous experience has been with exercise or movement, you belong here.
Come try it once, do a few moves, enjoy the music, enjoy the sense of community. You're going to want to come back. All right. So a lot of people ask me, what is, I think it's important also to hear participants talking about their experience, right? Not just my voice, but how do participants, one of the interesting things about those interviews is that people talk about the sort of some of the non-motor things that are going on for them, the sense of connection, the sense of confidence, right? Sense of agency that comes out. So let's talk about, because a lot of people say, well, isn't dance just another form of exercise? And I would say there are absolutely all of the benefits of exercise that you have from other modalities baked into a dance experience. But there are also some layers built on top of that that are really critical. So I want to talk about those. And I think I use these two photos to help explain that. So on the top, you see somebody doing steps on a treadmill. So a very common, right, sort of fitness modality where I'm putting one foot in front of the other. It's a pretty simple motor pattern, right? Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. I can vary the speed of that. I might be listening to music either to help me stay in rhythm, but more likely to help distract me from the boredom of doing this particular intervention, okay? There isn't really an expressive component. There isn't an emotional component, and there, in this particular intervention, no real social component. All right, let's talk about Gene Kelly here. Gene Kelly, if you scientifically took the number of steps that this person's doing on the treadmill and then counted the number of steps that Gene Kelly's doing in Singing in the Rain, you could find that as an equal value. Okay, she's doing 400 steps, he's doing 380 steps of tap dance. But what about those steps? How are they different? Well, the range of different movement qualities and different initiation qualities that Gene Kelly is using is very, very diverse, right? He's doing loud, quiet, big, small, all kinds of variety in his steps. He's also using different directions. He's going forward, side, back. He's turning. He's using music as a guide. And all on top of this, he's trying to express something emotionally. He's telling a story with his steps, right? So highly motivating, because let's face it, we all like to tell stories. We all like to share something about ourselves. There's a definition of loneliness. I think it's Carl Jung says that loneliness isn't necessarily about being alone in your room. It's not having opportunities to express yourself to others, to tell your story to others. So Gene Kelly has that in spades. So when we start to look at the elements of dance, yes, we see all of the fundamentals of exercise. We see stamina building, we see flexibility, we see strength building, but on top of this, there are all these other layers. And I wanted to look at that for a minute. So I want you all to take a little bit of movement with your hands. we had this earlier, it's just a flexion of the wrists. So just getting that going, it probably feels good after sitting for a while. You can also take a little bit of rotation. So flipping up and down. Right. And now we can take a stretch. Feels good for a moment. Just stretching your arms, stretching your fingers. And you can take that in front of you and maybe take it down below. And then come up. And just put a little bit of press into your fingers, a little bit of isometric press between your hands. Okay. All right. So I did some things that some of you might do in your daily exercise, or you might do with a physical therapist, some stretching, some mobility exercises. All right. So let's go back to thinking like a dancer. The first thing I want to talk about is an image. So let's use this image, for example. Let's think about the fingers diving over. Oh, that already changed how you're approaching it. So now your brain's getting involved. You're trying to recreate an aesthetic. You're thinking about the slope, the shape of that movement, right? How does it feel? Am I attacking it? No, it's not a rabid dolphin. It's just a regular, like, jumping into the water, diving dolphin, yes? So it modulates my timing. It modulates my dynamics. What about this? This is your gift. You're offering a gift to somebody, okay? So instead of just flipping your hands, which is an automatic movement that we might not have access to, I'm now giving you an image to think about offering that. And when we offer something, often we go past our natural kinesphere, which is kind of this bubble around us. And we might actually reach that out to somebody and make eye contact with them. When we do this in class, we start to actually see each other and dance together and entrain to each other. And then, what about this image here? This is our reaching out. Some of you have been on stage, some of you haven't, but this is what it looks like. It's kind of scary, right? There's a giant audience out there, and we want to make sure we're reaching to everybody. So the top balcony, the mezzanine, the orchestra, the conductor, and we're going to celebrate them, and we're going to acknowledge them with gratitude. So this no longer becomes an isometric activity. It's a meaning, it's a gesture, it's a bow. All right, so that's how we can start to put imagery into movement, which is a highly motivating element, because again, we like a story. The other thing that makes a story is that it has a beginning, middle, and an end, right? It has sentences, it has paragraphs, it has chapters. So let's think about the story of this movement. I have a dip, I offer a gift, and I come back. Well, now I've created what I call a phrase. Those of you who are musicians, you have phrases in music, right? We have phrases in dance. So this is one phrase, offer the gift, come back. Now I'm starting to deal with your memory, right? You're starting to recognize that pattern, and you're going to start to learn that pattern. And fortunately for us, Mark Morris choreographed a repeat here. So we're going to do that again. Dip, offer your gift, and come back. Then we're going to go into our next phrase, which is high, medium, low, and really low. And we're going to flick that movement up and offer our gratitude. So I've created these two sentences of movement, putting movements that otherwise are kind of boring and exercise movements into something that starts to tell a story, something that engages us as storytellers, as actors, as dancers. This is the creative part of what we do. And the thing that bonds all of this together is music. This guy lives very close to here, just over the river, Mr. Yo-Yo Ma. So we're going to have a little bit of music, and you can see how this story suddenly makes sense with the music. Let's see if this will play. Offer, come back. Dip. High. And look. Good. Try that again. Just really listening to the music as you go. Yes, nice. You hear the way the contours of the music are reflected in the movement, right? That high note. Yeah, da, da, da. So we start to build this relationship with the music that it supports our movements through and through. And that's really how we start to build layers of dance awareness on top of sort of the base of exercise. And that's really important to think about, because what we start to do is, yes, we're integrating all those elements of exercise, but there's a lot more going on for our brains than just right, left, right, left. And that in itself is critically important as we work to maintain cognitive health, coordination, balance is involved, not so much in this one, but in a lot of the patterns that we do. So clearly there is a relationship here between what dancers work on in their training and what people living with Parkinson's need to work on in your training. And I use that training word very intentionally, because the people who I see living successfully with Parkinson's are people who take on the mindset of a dancer or an athlete and build training into their daily lives. Now, training isn't all about being on the treadmill or the bike and sweating for an hour. There's all kinds of training. Yoga is training. Nia is training. Dance is training. Tai Chi is training. It's all different kinds of training and cross-training that support different aspects of quality of life and different aspects of movement. So I'm going to speak very briefly on this, but as I mentioned, there is now quite a bit of research on the impact of dance and Parkinson's. Now, one of the challenges of this field of research is that dance is a very broad spectrum, multifocal activity. Let's think about what we just did, right? Well, there's quite a lot of movement vocabulary compared to a treadmill, right? Which is a stepping and a swinging. I had all kinds of different joints moving. I had different focus points. I was here, I was here. If we were doing this in a class, we would be also dancing with each other. So there's a social component. Some people might know and love this music, and so there's an emotional connection. Oh, I used to listen to this all the time. Some people might not know this music and not have a connection. So too many variables for good science, to be quite honest. And that is one of the challenges when we're studying dance. How do we pare down the variables to start to understand what's happening in a dance intervention? It also is quite difficult to scan a moving body, right? Most of the fMRI work that we do is on somebody in an MRI machine. Now we can do some work, some basic EEG scans, which is like wearing a cap, and you can do some movement with that. But that has hampered some of this research. Nonetheless, there is some good, solid preliminary research here. And what is the research saying? Well, in terms of physical benefits, these are, I think, obvious. Dance in any form, whether you're talking about modern dance, ballet, hula, salsa, is all about balance. It's all about what I call dynamic balance. How do I go off center and come back? How do I do that with grace? How do I do that with rhythm? How do I make sure my muscles are going to respond when I step off center? This is away from where I naturally am. And how do my muscles work together to bring me back? Those of you who are in a dance or a boxing class, you do this all the time in your sessions, because dance and boxing are both about balance. Number two, gait. Dance, in whatever form, integrates walking and sliding and gliding in many, many different ways. So we work a lot on different walking patterns, different ways of articulating the feet. A lot of the same things you work on with your physical therapist, we work on in dance, except that we do it with music and we do it with social interaction. So there's a lot of motivation for those actions. Our physical therapist colleagues love that we work together with them, because what people work on in their sessions during the week, they come into the dance class, they can work on it. They get all of that reinforcement, but they also get to work with the F word, which is fun. It's fun, it's motivating, and people like to do those same exercises that they might do in PT in a dance environment and actually have a chance to do it in a social community. Endurance, something we work on in dance class quite a bit. We've seen that reflected in the research. And then a generalized reduced motor impairment that has been caught and measured on the UPDRS-3, which is the motor scale of the standard unified Parkinson's disease rating scale. So the dance intervention, the effects of dance intervention have shown up on UPDRS-3, which is pretty significant, particularly related to gait. This was a study done over 3 years, kind of longitudinal study that is common in the clinical world, but has not really been done in the Dance for Health world. This was a very preliminary study. It was a small cohort, but what we did see is some very initial promising results related to slowing down disease progression. And we see this in some other forms of exercise too, that exercise and dance may have the effect of slowing down progression. We can't stop it yet, but slowing down is a pretty good outcome. But as you've heard other speakers here talk about, there's a whole constellation of non-motor challenges as well, particularly in cognitive skill. And this is something that, again, dance has the potential to have an impact on. We see in some preliminary research better executive function. This is, we believe, related partly to the fact that dance involves a lot of motor planning, but in all of our classes, we also have an improvisatory component where dancers, the participants, have the opportunity to make decisions in the moment, spontaneous decision making. And practicing that skill over time may give people more confidence to make those decisions in the class, and maybe that carries over into daily life. We don't know that for sure, but it's a hypothesis. We also see reduced fatigue that you would probably find in many forms of exercise where you're, creating a more resilient body. There are endorphins that are stimulated by movement and exercise. So reduced fatigue is a big one, and also episodic memory. So this is one, again, some preliminary research on this from Kalyani in Australia, and what we see here is something that makes sense. Think about what we just did. We just learned a sequence of movement. We had to kind of learn that and execute it. And what if we came back next week and said, hey, you remember that phrase from last week? Let's do it again. And let's add on a little bit more from that Mark Morris piece, which is what we do in dance class. We're adding on little bits. So episodic memory, we're not surprised to see that outcome, but again, we need more research. And I think this is probably the biggest one in the non-motor side is the social emotional benefits. Some recent research on reduced symptoms of depression, for example, reduced feelings of anger, improved quality of life, improved self-efficacy. This is an interesting one that people who come into the dance class have confidence to do other things. So often the dance class, because it is perhaps more accessible, we build in lots of different mobility levels within the class. People start in dance and then they realize, wow, I actually can do some of these things. I'm going to try another activity. I'm going to try something that I thought I couldn't do before, but now I'm going to do it. It also opens up confidence for other arts-based activities like singing or painting. People come to love the creative aspect of dance and they say, I'm going to explore my creative side a little bit more. So improved self-efficacy is good. And the last one, probably the most obvious, you saw that in the initial cave paintings from Borneo. When we're dancing together, we have an increased sense of connection, social belonging, and social inclusion. And that's been evidenced in a number of the studies. So I think it's fair to say, though, at the end of the day, regardless of the research, people come to class for a variety of reasons, right? There are a wide variety of personal motivations to come to class. Some come for mood improvement. Some come because it gives them a sense of hope. Some come because they want to work on a very specific skill like balance or gait, right? So I think the power of dance is that it integrates these 4 areas: the physical, the cognitive, the expressive or emotional side, and the social. And we don't clinically separate those in the class. When we're working in a class, in a dance class, we put all of those together into each activity. So you're in a sort of integrative, holistic modality that really touches on all of these 4 points all at the same time. And that's one of the very powerful things about dance. I'm going to skip to some FAQs, and then we have a couple minutes for you to ask. So one is, okay, so is dance better than other activities? Is boxing better than other activities? And my answer to that is the better is whatever you're going to do on a regular basis. That's the better. Because if you say, okay, cycling at 90 RPM 3 times a week is the best thing, and there's some good clinical research on that from Jay Alperts at Cleveland Clinic, that's great. But if you're not going to do that, then it's irrelevant that that's a clinically relevant finding, right? Because it's theoretical. The clinically relevant finding for you is what are you going to be motivated to do every day or every other day to stay moving. And I am a big advocate for what I call a movement ecosystem. So building a portfolio of movement activities that complement each other really well. I think that's not just based on what we know about Parkinson's, that we need to work on different kind of subsets of exercise. That includes stamina, it includes flexibility, it includes balance training, it includes cognitive training. Dance puts a lot of those together, but it's not the only thing you should do. You should also do other fitness-based things, other aerobic-based activities, things like yoga and Tai Chi and ping pong. These are all really valuable and each bring a particular dynamic that addresses something very specific. I wanted to share this concept because it is not a concept unique to Parkinson's well-being. It's a concept that dancers and athletes use all the time. It's called cross-training. So dancers and athletes, we do other forms of movement to build our strength and skill level in our primary sport. I'm going to end with this. This is a boxer from Australia named Harry Garside.
As athletes, we search for the edge, those 1%ers, those things that's going to get us above our opponents and our competitors. At that level, those 1% make the difference, and that's the reason why I looked at studying ballet, and I think it's going to give me a lot more than 1%. Ballet has been fantastic for my boxing. The strength through the legs, the transferring of the weight, the technique. There's so many similarities to boxing, but it's completely different at the same time. They make it look very elegant. Ours is a bit more rough around the edges. It's very, very similar. When I first said I wanted to start ballet, there was so many different emotions. My trainer he's very old school. He said, "Ballet? What are you starting ballet for?" My dad raised his eyebrows. My competitors are thinking, why is he doing ballet? I give everything to my preparation. I make sure I leave no stone left unturned. And when I get in that ring, I know I've done everything I possibly can to be ready for this moment.
So a great argument for cross-training, I would say your ring is living with Parkinson's. And so you want to do everything you can to get in that ring with all of the skills and all of the tools that can keep you well, keep you fighting for as long as possible. So I'm gonna stop there. We have 1 minute, 2 minutes for questions.
I love to dance and I was a gymnast. What do you do at weddings to be part of things while dealing with pain, freezing, and crowds of drunks on dance floor?
Oh, that's a great question. So this is somebody who really wants to be involved in social dancing at a wedding. What I tend to do, because I have the same issue, I kind of am protective of my space. And what happens at weddings is people flail at you and they hit you, and I don't really want to be hit in the face. So I find my own little corner. I find somebody that I want to dance with, and I find just a corner of the room, and that's my little world over there in the corner. I don't have to be in the center of the mosh pit. I can find somebody, and what's really nice is that the benefits of dance, the social benefits of dance are there whether you're dancing with one other person or 50 other people. So if you can find somebody that wants to dance with you, find your corner, create your space, and protect yourself from the mosh pit. That would be my advice. And remember that dancing in a chair is still dancing. A lot of, the first part of our class, at least one version of our class is done seated so that people do not have to worry about balance. And there is so much you can do in the chair. So that's another way if you're feeling unsteady that day, or you're worried about freezing or falling, dancing either in a chair or gently holding on to somebody or something like a chair or a table, just so you have that support. Most people won't even notice, but you know you have that extra support.